Knowing what goes through a man's mind when he sees that your dignity is stronger than your love for him isn't pretty, isn't tender, and isn't pleasant. It's devastating to his ego, because here he's not just losing affection, he's losing position. This video isn't here to comfort you or inflate your self-esteem. It exists to show you the exact psychological mechanism that activates when he discovers he can no longer have you at any price. And when that happens, nothing feels the same for either of you. If these words resonate within you, know that what you're hearing isn't consolation. It's the story of how a conscious inner structure can transform every relationship dynamic. I've gathered all of this in a book called The Art of Detachment, where you'll discover how to reclaim your power when someone you love pulls away, and how to stop betraying yourself in the small things to return to your center. You'll find the link in the description, and when you're ready, it's yours. Back to what you're listening to now. Here you'll hear the 6 real mental stages his mind goes through when your dignity prevails from initial confusion to inner breakdown to the point where the dynamic reverses forever. If you leave before the end, you'll miss the most dangerous and decisive part, the one that separates the woman who gives in again from the woman who will never be taken for granted again. This isn't just any content. It's the message you need to hear in full if you don't want to lose yourself again for love. Carl Jung warned that no one confronts another human being without first confronting their own shadow. And that's exactly what happens here. Your dignity forces him to see what he'd been avoiding. If any of this is already landing for you, subscribe and write "I'm reading" in the comments. That way YouTube understands this reflection deserves to go further, because if you hear it at the right moment, it won't just change your mood, it'll change the inner structure from which you love. First stage, the moment he realizes you're no longer negotiable. Listen carefully, because here a very common fantasy shatters. A man doesn't notice he's losing you when you leave, he notices when he can no longer move you internally. It's not a phrase, not an announced boundary, not an emotional scene. It's a silent shift in your inner position, and when it happens, he perceives it long before
when in land if you
Let me make this concrete with a real case. Chris Bell came to me for consultation with a story that repeats more often than you'd imagine. Affectionate, deep, committed, she didn't beg, didn't chase, didn't make scenes. From the outside, anyone would have said she had dignity, but internally she was negotiating in silence, justifying absences, waiting too long, tolerating small inconsistencies so as not to be inconvenient until something changed, not outside, but inside. And that movement activated the first real rupture in his mind. For years, Chris Bell confused patience with mature love. She thought understanding meant yielding, that adapting meant caring, and without realizing it, she taught her inner system and his that her space could expand without breaking. Every long wait, every lukewarm response, every accumulated "it's fine" formed a silent dynamic. There was no malice, but there was no growth either, because when you adapt too much, the other person never feels the urgency to get themselves in order. And this is felt even if it's never said. The rupture didn't arrive with a slammed door or tears. It arrived the day Chris Bell stopped over-explaining herself. Something didn't sit right with her, and she stopped justifying it. Something irritated her, and she stopped swallowing it. She didn't leave, didn't threaten, didn't complain. She simply stopped betraying herself in the small things. This gesture, as invisible as it was radical, reconfigures everything, because when you return to yourself, your energy stops asking, stops adapting so the other person won't leave. And this is felt as an immediate loss of access. Here appears the first male mental reaction. It's not fear yet, it's discomfort. He doesn't understand what's changed, he just feels that something no longer reacts the same way. Your silence weighs differently, your boundaries don't sound defensive, your presence no longer offers itself as before, and this forces him to observe not to take care of you, but to reposition himself. Because when a woman stops being negotiable without announcing it, the man finds himself facing a new sensation. The dynamic he took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Carl Jung would say that at this point, the shadow activates that part of the psyche that reacts when it loses emotional control, not domination access. He doesn't think I'm going to lose her. He thinks something deeper. I no longer understand what position to relate to her from. Before, when Chris Bell left, he lost a woman. Now when she left, he lost a comfortable inner position. And this unsettles more than physical absence. Because love can be replaced, embodied dignity cannot. It's important that you see this clearly. This doesn't happen when you leave. It happens when you make 3 inner movements. You stop staying where your body tenses to maintain the relationship. You stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't willing to listen. You begin making small decisions that align with yourself, even if the other person doesn't like them. Not to provoke, but to respect yourself. When you do this, you don't become cold, you become clear. And clarity is deeply intimidating to someone who is comfortable in your emotional ambiguity. The man begins to measure, observes timing, words, reactions, not because you're manipulating him, but because you've stopped manipulating yourself, so he'll stay. Here his fantasy breaks, she's always there. And when this certainty falls, his mind goes on alert. It's not love yet, it's rearrangement, because no one appreciates what seems unconditional, but they do appreciate what has silent boundaries. This is the true beginning of psychological respect. Many women believe dignity is hardness. No, dignity is inner coherence maintained over time. Chris Bell didn't become distant, she became whole. And this activated a dangerous question in him. What place do I occupy now? You're no longer reaction, you're presence. You no longer chase, you choose. And this constant choosing without words disarms every dynamic based on comfort. There's no punishment here, there's structure. And structure orders more than any declaration of love. This stage is silent but irreversible. Because once your system learns it doesn't have to strain to love, it can never go back. He feels it even if he doesn't name it. He knows something has changed, that he can no longer count on your emotional flexibility. And this forces him to define himself, grow or withdraw. Both options arise from the same point: your return to yourself. Not from an external threat, but from an inner integrity that's no longer negotiable. I want you to hold this phrase as an anchor because it changes the entire board. I don't have to leave to stop being negotiable. I have to return to myself. When you integrate this, the bond stops holding itself together by inertia, and the masculine mind, losing comfort, begins to compare. Not you with the past, but with any other woman who doesn't embody this level of coherence. And there's something even deeper begins. In the next stage, we'll enter this critical point. Because your dignity activates more respect than all the love you've given. Because without you realizing it, he begins measuring what he had with you against what he can no longer obtain so easily. This is the moment when the inner game becomes irreversible, and when you stop being a memory to become a reference. Second stage, why your dignity activates more respect than all the love you gave together. It hurts, but it liberates. Love without structure becomes landscape. It's there, it sustains, but it doesn't order. What truly reorganizes a man's mind is the inner form from which you love. When you love without abandoning yourself, when you don't shrink to fit, he can no longer read you from comfort. And this silent, firm change weighs more than any emotional promise you made before. The common mistake is believing that giving more love generates more commitment. No, it generates more habit. Dignity, however, introduces a new variable: consequence. Not punishment, not coldness, coherence. Jung explained that the psyche respects what has contour. When you have clear inner boundaries, the other person perceives that something exists that they cannot cross without being transformed. And this awakens respect even before desire. Because now he doesn't possess you emotionally. He must position himself before you. Here, an unconscious comparison occurs. He begins making contrasts. He doesn't verbalize it, but he feels it. Your current presence against the past version that always adapted. Your calm against your old waiting. And this comparison generates inner tension. Because before, your love was guaranteed. Now your access isn't. And when access stops being secure, the masculine mind enters evaluation, not romantic, strategic. Do I rise up or lose this position? This question marks a before and after. Many women think this is manipulation. No, it's not. Manipulating would mean changing to provoke a reaction. Here you're not changing for him, you're changing for coherence with yourself. And this is felt differently. Your energy no longer pushes, doesn't ask, doesn't adapt. It simply is. And this stable presence, without effort, disarms more than any speech, because he can no longer lean on your emotional flexibility to stay the same. Now he must grow or feel uncomfortable until he leaves. In consultation, this point appears in their confused phrases. I don't know what's happening to me. I perceive her differently. Before it was simpler. Simple isn't love. It's access without consequences. And when that's lost, something new appears. Real attention. Not always healthy, not always mature, but finally attention because your dignity has forced his system to wake up. Not from fear of losing you physically, but from the sensation of losing an inner position that gave him security without effort. This is where many women doubt and step back. When he begins approaching differently, measuring, being more attentive, the temptation to give in again appears, and there everything is decided. Because if you use your dignity as strategy, it dilutes. But if you maintain it as identity, it solidifies. Jung would say this is the moment when the bond stops being projection and becomes conscious choice, and not everyone is ready to choose from there. Your dignity doesn't guarantee he'll stay. It guarantees something more important, that you won't lose yourself. And paradoxically, that's what has the most impact, because you no longer move from fear of losing him. You move from respect for your inner axis. And this emotional autonomy changes the balance. He's no longer the evaluator. Now he's the one who must understand if he can rise to the level of coherence you embody without announcing it. This respect isn't born from sacrifice. It's born from boundaries. Not from drama, but from calm maintained. When you don't react from the wound but from clarity, he can no longer play at the same level as before, and this makes things uncomfortable. But it also awakens, because dignity doesn't seduce like attachment does, but it leaves a trace that doesn't erase easily, not even when the relationship ends. You become the inner reference, not the romantic memory. I want you to see this without idealizing. Some men grow in the face of this, others withdraw. Both results are coherent. What changes is that you no longer negotiate your center to hold on to someone. And when your love is born from there, it stops being a constant offer and becomes shared choice. This is the difference between being desired and being respected. And the masculine mind, even if it doesn't admit it, always knows when it's facing the latter. In the next stage, we'll enter an even more delicate zone. What happens when he begins to feel fear, not of losing you, but of not being enough to keep you? There, contradictory behaviors appear, approaches and withdrawals, silent tests. And if you don't understand this point, you can confuse intensity with love. But if you do understand it, you'll remain steady while the dynamic completely flips from within. Third stage, when respect begins transforming into silent fear. It's not the childish fear of losing you, it's the adult fear of not measuring up. Here the masculine mind enters contradiction. He wants to approach but fears exposing himself. He seeks you then withdraws, not because he's playing, but because his identity is reorganizing. Your dignity forces him to look at himself without the cushion of your availability, and this activates an inner anxiety. Even if outwardly he shows calm or distant, this fear doesn't express itself with clear words. It appears as ambiguity, lukewarm messages, intense gestures. He tests if you're still there, but not from the same place. And when he realizes you don't react as before, that you don't chase or complain, the unease grows, because now he can no longer regulate himself through your emotional reaction. Jung would call this a collision with the true self, without masks. And not everyone knows how to bear that inner gaze. Many women misinterpret this moment. They confuse intensity with progress. They believe intermittent closeness is a sign of emerging love. Not always. Sometimes it's just a system trying to regain control. Your job isn't to decode it, but to stay steady. If you don't move from fear, if you don't fill the voids, he finds himself facing something new, his own emptiness. And this encounter can transform him or push him to flee. The important thing is this: listen to it calmly. Your dignity doesn't accelerate processes, it reveals them. If he approaches from presence, you'll feel it. If he approaches from fear, you'll feel it just the same. The difference lies in stability. Love born from fear needs constant proof. Love born from respect seeks connection. And you, by not abandoning your center, become the natural filter that distinguishes one from the other without saying a single word. At this point, the dynamic has already begun to reverse. Before, you were the one measuring timing, words, gestures. Now it's him. He observes whether you're still available, whether something loosens, whether you return to adapting. And when you don't, a sensation appears that's uncomfortable but revealing. He no longer has you secured. Not because you're leaving, but because you're no longer dependent. It's this emotional independence that reorganizes his perception of value more than anything. Jung stated that authentic desire is born when the other cannot be possessed, only met. Your dignity removes you from the position of emotional object and restores you to that of subject. And this changes the gaze. You're no longer the one who's always there. You're the one who chooses to be there. This difference seems subtle, but it completely transforms the experience of the bond, because now he's no longer relating to your dedication, but to your conscious presence. This is a delicate phase for you too, because if he shows fear or confusion, it can reawaken your old role, reassuring, explaining, supporting. Here's where it's decided whether your dignity is identity or strategy. If you give energy back to the bond, the system returns to the familiar. If you maintain yourself, something new installs itself, not from coldness, but from inner coherence. And this coherence begins requiring from him a clearer position. Some men at this point rise up. They become more present, more emotionally responsible. Others weaken, not because you did something wrong, but because the level has risen and dignity doesn't negotiate downward. You don't push, don't threaten. You simply don't descend. And this redefines the bond without confrontation, because true respect isn't imposed, it's embodied. And when it's embodied, it can no longer be ignored. I want you to observe something important. When he begins to change, it's not because you convinced him, it's because your integrity put him face to face with himself. And when he doesn't change, it's not a failure, it's information. Your dignity saves you years of confusion. It shows you who can meet you at the level where you are and who could only love you when you made yourself smaller. This clarity hurts at first, but it liberates in the long term. In the next stage, we'll enter the point of no return. When he understands he can no longer return to the version of you that bent, a definitive inner decision appears, not always conscious, but determining. And depending on how you maintain yourself at that point, this decision can transform him profoundly or seal the ending with an elegance that wasn't possible before. Fourth stage, the moment he understands there's no going back. The version of you that waited, that adapted, that yielded just to maintain things doesn't return. And this certainty doesn't arrive with a conversation. It arrives with an irreversible inner sensation. He can no longer provoke the same reaction in you, can no longer count on your emotional availability. Something is closed not from resentment, but from coherence. And when this happens, his mind stops testing and begins deciding from a deeper place. Here, a silent mourning appears. He's not grieving your physical absence. He's grieving the loss of a dynamic that gave him security without effort. And this hurts more than you imagine, because confronting a woman who doesn't back down forces him to accept his own limits. Jung defined this point as the death of a projection. You no longer carry his voids, and when the projection falls, only two paths remain: mature or withdraw emotionally. If he decides to stay, the way he looks at you changes, no longer from comfort, but from conscious respect. He begins regulating himself, taking emotional responsibility, measuring what he offers, not from fear of losing you, but because he understands he can't keep you from the same level. Your dignity has raised the standard without demanding it, and this movement redefines the bond. You're no longer refuge, you're encounter. And not everyone knows how to love from there. If he decides to leave, Even the closure is different. There's no persistent drama, no eternal back and forth. There's a clear sensation of inner boundary. You don't chase explanations, don't try to convince, and this leaves a trace, because even if he leaves, he carries with him an impossible to erase reference, that of a woman who didn't negotiate her access for love. This image returns later when other dynamics no longer suffice. This point is decisive for you because here doubt usually appears. Was I too rigid? You are coherent, and coherence is never excess. Love that only survives if you shrink yourself isn't love, it's dependence. Your dignity didn't destroy anything precious. It only revealed what couldn't sustain itself at your level. And even if it hurts to let go, something in you begins to rest. There's no more constant tension, no silent self-abandonment. Carl Jung would say that here your true individuation begins. You no longer define yourself by being chosen, but by choosing yourself. And this identity transforms all your future bonds, because now you don't love from lack, you love from presence. You don't seek to be enough, you already are. And this energy changes how others approach, not by request, but by recognition. Your dignity becomes the natural filter. This stage marks the definitive before and after. It doesn't matter if he returns or not. You never return to the version that waited for crumbs. And this is the real gain, because now you know you don't need intensity to feel valuable, nor promises to stay. Your calm becomes home, and from there, only those who know how to inhabit it without trying to disturb it to feel superior can enter. Many men remember this type of woman not with romantic nostalgia, but with belated respect, because she was the one who showed them the boundary they couldn't cross, and that boundary, far from shutting them out, put them face to face with themselves. You didn't teach with discourse, you taught through embodiment. And that's what remains when everything else dissolves with time. I want you to breathe here because this isn't a point of hardness, it's a point of calm. You no longer have to sustain the unsustainable, no longer have to translate yourself to be loved. Your dignity hasn't isolated you, it's ordered you, and when you're ordered within, the outside begins responding differently, not always quickly, not always simply, but always more authentically. In the next and final stage, we'll close the circle. What happens when you integrate all this as identity, not as reaction to a specific story? How your way of loving and being chosen will be rewritten, there, where you no longer define yourself by who stays, but by what you'll never again allow. This is the point where love stops hurting and begins feeling authentic. Fifth stage, when you integrate dignity as identity, not as response to a wound. Here you no longer act from the past, you act from presence. Your decisions don't seek an effect, they seek coherence, and this is notice. Your yes has weight, your no rests. There's no urgency to define anything because you're already defined from within. This stability changes how others read you, because there are no more emotional cracks through which to enter to negotiate your value. At this point, love stops being a continuous test. You no longer need signals to feel secure. Your body is aligned with your boundaries, your words with your actions. And this congruence, so simple and so rare, becomes magnetic, not from seduction, but from clarity. Those who approach perceive it, and those who can't sustain it withdraw without noise. Dignity doesn't argue, it orders the field. Here something subtle happens. You begin noticing you no longer hook onto vague promises or directionless intensity. Your system recognizes the difference between presence and performance. This saves you time, energy, illusions. You don't become demanding, you become precise. And emotional precision is a language only understood by those ready to connect without games. The rest falls away on its own, without friction. Carl Jung spoke of integration as the act of stopping fragmenting yourself to please others. That's what you're doing here. You no longer separate what you feel from what you allow. You don't negotiate your intuition to maintain a bond. And when someone tries to cross a boundary, your body reacts before your words. There's no anger, there's an elegant withdrawal. And this withdrawal, far from closing the heart, protects it. This is the point where many say, I no longer attract the same type of people. Exactly. Because you no longer transmit from lack. Your dignity changes the frequency. You no longer call in those who need to be held, but those who know how to hold themselves. And this doesn't guarantee quantity, it guarantees quality. Less noise, more truth. Less fear, more choice. Your love life doesn't simplify because you love less, but because you love yourself better. Here the memory of him loses force, not because he wasn't important, but because he no longer occupies the center. The center is you, and from there, the past orders itself without resentment. You're grateful for what you learned, and you move forward. There are no open accounts. There are inner closures. This is true liberation. Not when the other returns or asks forgiveness, but when you no longer need him to be at peace. This change is also noticed in the silence. You no longer explain your boundaries. Don't justify your decisions. You simply act in coherence, and this coherence becomes your new normal. Those who arrive late perceive it. There's no reproach. There's natural distance. Dignity doesn't build walls, it establishes thresholds, and only those who know how to cross them without invading can enter. When you look back, you understand something important. You didn't lose love, You gained inner structure, and this structure is the foundation of every healthy bond. Without it, love overflows and wounds. With it, love contains itself and grows. Jung would say that here the bond stops being compensation and becomes true encounter. Two emotionally mature people choosing each other, not needing each other. This is the legacy of your dignity, not changing anyone, but moving yourself to another place, leaving the role of constant option and inhabiting that of conscious choice. And from there, everything reorganizes: your relationships, your energy, your decisions. You no longer chase, you attract presence. You no longer fear losing. Y- You trust your ability to choose better. And now, at the close of this cycle, remember this, because it contains everything that precedes it. Your dignity doesn't distance you from love, it brings you to the right one. It doesn't make you inaccessible, it makes you authentic. And when you're authentic, love stops being a struggle and becomes a home. From here, you don't go back because you no longer seek to be chosen, you choose yourself. Sixth stage, when everything reconfigures from within. You no longer act from reaction, you act from identity. This is the point where dignity stops being a concept and becomes your natural way of being in the world. You no longer ask yourself what to do so the other stays. You ask yourself if that bond honors who you are now. And this silent question guides every decision. There's no urgency, no fear. There's a firm calm that's no longer negotiable. And here, something profound happens. Your nervous system learns that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with connection, nor sacrifice with commitment. Your body recognizes when something is healthy and when it's not. And this inner intelligence saves infinite explanations. You don't have to close cycles with words, you close them with coherence. And that coherence is felt even in your silence, even when you say nothing. Many men don't forget a woman like this, not because she was perfect, but because she was whole. Because she didn't betray herself to be chosen, because she showed without speaking what someone who respects themselves looks like. Jung said that what isn't integrated repeats itself, and you've broken the repetition. So you've become an inner reference point for those who've known you. Not everyone recognizes it immediately, but everyone remembers it. And this is the point where love stops being a psychological game. There are no more tests, strategies, roles to maintain. There's presence, there's mutual choice, and if there isn't, there's still peace, because your value no longer depends on being desired, but on being faithful to yourself. This inner faithfulness is the foundation of every bond worth living. Without it, everything is negotiated. With it, everything orders itself. I want you to hear this with gentleness. Not everyone can love you from this level, and it's not a loss. It's a natural purification. Your dignity doesn't exclude, it filters. It lets in those who can sustain a relationship without depending on your self-sacrifice. And even if the path becomes more selective, it also becomes lighter. Less noise, less confusion, more truth. And when you integrate all this, you no longer look back with guilt, but with understanding. You understand why you yielded, why you waited, why you adapted, and you also understand why you can no longer do it. Not because you're hard, but because you've grown. And growing means letting go of old versions of yourself. This too is self-worth, one that doesn't need to prove itself, only sustain itself. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the most courageous act of the human being, becoming what you truly are, even if it means losing bonds that existed only through dependence. You've walked this path, and thus you've changed the way you love, choose, and let yourself be chosen. You no longer seek to complete yourself, you share from your fullness. This is love that doesn't consume itself. If this message has reached you, stay a moment, like and subscribe. If these words have touched your heart, write in the comments which part resonated most deeply within you. Because when we share from truth, YouTube favors what we choose together, and this type of reflection only reaches those ready to hear it. Don't forget this when you close the video. Your dignity isn't a barrier, it's a lighthouse. It doesn't chase love away, it orients it. And whoever comes toward you from now on will come knowing they can't take you for granted, but they can find you through choice. This is the difference between a bond that consumes and one that sustains. Today, you're not leaving with techniques, but with an embodied truth. You don't have to prove your worth or convince anyone to stay. Your simple presence, aligned and steady, already says everything. As a final reminder, integrated into a phrase that will accompany you from now on, because it defines your new place. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love. This phrase contains everything. It's not a threat, it's a declaration of integrity. When you carry it within, your way of being in relationships changes completely. You no longer seek to be loved despite your boundaries. You're loved precisely because of them. And this changes everything, because finally love isn't a negotiation, it's a recognition. Remember that this transformation doesn't happen in a day. It's a silent process, a gradual return to yourself. Every time you choose not to betray yourself in the small things, every time you maintain a boundary without explanations, every time you act from coherence instead of fear, you're building this new inner structure. And he, whoever he is, feels it. He doesn't always understand it, doesn't always admit it, but he feels it. The beauty of this journey is that it doesn't depend on him. It doesn't depend on what he does, what he says, what he promises. It depends only on you, on how willing you are to return to yourself, on how willing you are to stop betraying yourself for love. And when you do it, when you truly do it, something shifts not only in him, but in your entire relational universe. Because dignity is contagious. When you embody it, others begin recognizing it, respecting it, measuring themselves against it. Some will leave, it's true. Those who needed your flexibility to stay comfortable, those who loved the version of you that made itself smaller, those who drew security from your infinite availability. But others will arrive, or perhaps he'll stay, but different, more aware, more present, more responsible. And even if no one stayed, you would still have gained the most important thing, yourself. Yeah. Because in the end, when all the noise settles, when all the love stories end, when all the bonds transform or close, only one thing remains, the relationship you have with yourself. And if that relationship is built on dignity, on coherence, on faithfulness to your boundaries, then you have everything. Because you no longer depend on anyone to feel whole. You no longer depend on him to feel valuable. You no longer depend on so, as you close this video, as you hear these final words, I want you to do something. I want you to place a hand on your heart and feel that dignity that's already there inside. It's not something you have to build from scratch. It's something you have to recognize, awaken, allow to emerge. It's already part of you. It's always been part of you. Maybe you forgot it. Maybe you set it aside for love. Maybe you betrayed it out of fear, but it's still there. And from this moment forward, your task is simple. Don't betray it anymore. Don't betray that part of you that knows what it deserves, that knows what its boundaries are, that knows when something isn't right. Listen to it. Follow it. Even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. Because fear is just the signal that you're about to do something important, something that will change the course of your life. And he, whoever he is, will notice this change. He might not understand it right away, might resist, might test your boundaries to see if they're truly solid. But it doesn't matter, because you're not doing this for him. You're doing it for you. And that's the difference that changes everything. When you act from dignity, when you act from coherence, when you act from respect for yourself, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, everything changes. So remember this phrase, carry it with you. Let it transform your way of being in the world. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love. It's not a threat, it's a promise to yourself. A promise that from this moment on, you won't negotiate your access for anyone, that you won't shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable, that you won't betray your boundaries out of fear of losing. And when you keep this promise, when you truly keep it, something magical happens. Love stops being a struggle. It becomes a choice. And that choice, that conscious, free one that comes from your center and not your fear, that's the love worth living. That's the love that transforms. That's the love that remains. Thank you for listening to the end.